Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday Fast Track Hangout with Autodesk HSM. I'm Wayne Griffenberg. I'm a CAD/CAM applications engineer at Autodesk, and I'm here to talk to you about what our Fast Track to CNC programming project, or shall I say, what that program is. And I'm also going to walk through with you today, designing up a part, show you how to get that design you have on your napkin sketch into Fusion 360. Today we're doing milling. I'm going to walk through designing up a part, getting it into a vise, and getting that code over to your machine. Before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about our Fast Track to CNC programming project, or shall I say the program. Part of this program is about getting you started. If you're new with our interfaces and you're new to working with Autodesk CAM, with Fusion or Inventor or HSM Works, this Fast Track program is for you, to help you get started, to show you how our interface works, how you're able to easily get your design into one of our integrated CAD platforms and being able to put Toolpaths on to get code out to your machine. We also have, in the Fast Track program, our seminars that are happening across the U.S., and it's happening all year long, and this will lead up to our Autodesk University, where we do the overall seminars and workshops. But right now we have them going on across the country at different partner centers, as well as our hubs at Autodesk and resellers. And if you join up to the Fast Track, which is free, join into Fast Track and you'll see when those seminars are going to be near you that you can join for hands-on classes. Also in the Fast Track you'll get links to when our webinars will be happening, which webinars we're holding on Wednesdays and Fridays, and special webinars we have for our integrated CAD/CAM interfaces, as well as getting access to Pluralsight. We have a lot of our expert elites who are in there creating classes, as well as our resellers, to help you learn how to use our interfaces. You'll find tips and tricks, hands-on classes with parts you can download and follow along with, and also how to work with your post-processors and specifics for your machine. So you'll get access to Pluralsight training as well. It all starts with a trial. So you're here because you downloaded or you're going to download one of our integrated CAM interfaces, whether you're working with Inventor, HSM Works inside of SolidWorks, was completely integrated in the SolidWorks, or our CAM, which is already inside of our cloud product, which is Fusion 360. It all leads up to Autodesk University. So at Autodesk University this year, it's going to be at the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas from November 14th through 16th. I highly recommend attending Autodesk University. It's a lot of those seminars that are added up, a lot of our elite classes going on, or elite users who are putting on classes. Essentially, it's users teaching users, power users. We have users in our Autodesk organization who are experts with CAD and CAM. And this year it's going to be very CAM heavy, so we're going to have lots of machine manufacturers there, as well as classes like the ones with John Saunders that will teach you hands-on how to work with a part, design a part, put your code, your CAM on the part, and get the code out to the machines. You can do this hands-on at Autodesk University. You still have some time until this Friday, June 16th, to go into our Autodesk University website, and you can vote on those proposals for classes by our elite users, by power users who are going to who put in a proposal for their different classes, and you can go in and choose what type of class you'd like to see. A lot of them are CAM basic, and also accelerated or advanced CAM classes as well. I highly recommend going in, taking a look at what classes are out there, and vote for the ones that you'd like to see. So it all leads up into Autodesk University, but this is our Fast Track program that you can join up. You can go to that link that I have up here, join up to that Fast Track program. You'll have access to the seminar schedule, the webinar schedule, as well as Pluralsight training and ways that you can get to Autodesk University. Okay, so we're going to get started today on today's webinar to help you walk through those steps that you need to learn to be able to get that napkin sketch into Fusion, draw up your part really quickly in Fusion, make a model, and then we're going to download a vise, Curt Vise, and we're going to put the part that we modeled up inside of the vise, and I'm going to show you how to get some CAM on the part to be able to get code out to your machine. Okay, so this is the part that we're going to be working with today. It's a simple adapter plate. If I take a look real quick to give you an idea, it's a carburetor, if I could spell. It's a carburetor adapter plate. So something like this, a real simple adapter plate that looks similar to one of these that we're going to model up real quick, make the venturi, and then we're going to put it into a vise, download a vise, and put it in there and put some CAM on it. Okay, so this is the part we're going to make, and here's what the resultant assembly is going to look like. Download the Curt assembly, insert the part, put some CAM on it. All right, so let's get started with that. If you guys have any questions as we're going through, there's a questions panel inside of your GoToWebinar. You can always ask questions. If you want to ask, I can get an answer for you. If I don't have an answer, I'll find one and get one for you. Okay, so let me close out of my PowerPoint. We're going to get started directly working inside of Fusion. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to bring up my browser. We're going to make a part that looks like this. I'm going to access my 360, Autodesk A360, which is my Fusion team site. Before I do, I'm going to download the vise while we're here. So I'm going to go into Curt Vises, going to go into my Google, and then just type up my Curt. I'm going to use a Curt D810 today. So I'm just going to click on Curt D810. It looks like I was searching for the same vise before. That's the one we work with on the machine at the Haas VF machine, VF2 at Pier 9. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of this page here, and I can see where we can download models. We have a preview of what that Curt Vise is going to look like. We have a lot of different types of models that we can work with. I can download CATIA models, IGES, Inventor, IronCAD, step models. I'm going to download a SolidWorks part or assembly. In this case, it'll come into Fusion as a part, but I'm going to download the SolidWorks assembly. I don't want to keep it zipped, but the version 2017 will work. I'm just going to download it, and I'm going to save it into my downloads folder. Okay, we're going to upload this in a little while into Fusion. In fact, let's do it now. So I'm going to go into walk through with you some of the hubs that I work with. So let me close this out. I'm going to go into A360. Okay, I'm going to go into my hubs. Now I'm working with Fusion Team, but I'm going to go into my main hub down here. So when you start working with Fusion, you'll get in access from your account a hub that you can keep your data. And we start off with a basic hub with a basic project to start out with, and later on you can create new folders, new projects that you can share with your colleagues or your customers. So you can start to load data in here. You can see it looks similar to almost like a social media site. But these are the projects that I'm working with. I can see ones that I have pinned that I've worked with in the past. And we're going to work in this project here, the Fast Track project today. But I can also see over here some activity and people that I'm working with. So these are some projects that they've shared with me or I'm sharing with them. And I can see activity that's been happening. Some files have been uploaded to some of the projects, and I can always click on here and go to those projects and those files and to take a look and see what's going on. I can also see other information, like if I go into this Fast Track for CNC project, one that I'm working on, I can also see some details and activity. I can also view and manage members of the projects and add and invite new people to the project. I can just put their email address here. They'll have an invite, and I can control whether the people can download the file or just view it or work with the file. Okay, I'm going to switch to a different hub. So right now, this is my hub that I'm working in, my Fusion Fast Track programming. In this hub that I have that are my folders, I'm going to switch over to a hub where I work with our CAM team. So I'm going to switch over to another hub. So this way, when somebody else has their Fusion and they have all their projects and folders, they can share that with you as well. So I'm going to go into this hub where we share technical resources with our team when we do trainings and we do demos. We all have access to the same technical training files. So if I go into my Fusion 2D machining training files, I can go into these projects. I can see who has access and who's an editor in the project admin for those projects. I can also see activity that's been happening in these projects as well. So I can see some of them, but I'd like to see what the parts look like. So I'm going to go and change this over. So now I can see with icons what those parts look like, or the assemblies that we're working with. These parts here we use. Here's an overview, the intro that we use for training. I'm going to click in the overview, and now I can go in and see what's going on inside of this project, parts that are used in it. I can see some renderings that will be on the cloud, so you can get full renderings right out of Fusion. But I'm going to click on it to get a closer view of the assembly. I can see the design history up here in the corner, so I can expand this down and see what parts are in it inside the design history. I can also see, let me expand this out a little bit. I can also see the assembly. I can see the parts in the assembly. I'm able to do this right inside of my browser. I can take a look at properties of the parts. I just click properties here and I can see the properties of the part itself. I can also get some measurements. I can measure between the holes. If I want to measure the center hole to this center hole, I can get those measurements right off the part itself. I can also take some section views. I can take a section view off the X-plane here, and I can drag this back and I can see what's happening inside of those holes right there. I can also change the angle of the section view as well. So you can section right inside of your browser. I can also get an exploded view. So if I want to see what's inside of that assembly, I can explode it like this. And I can get an exploded view right inside the assembly as well. I can do markups. I can add comments. I can add marker information in here. I can do a full markup on here, and then save it so that anybody who's looking at this project are able to see the markups and any of the questions I may have on the part. So now I'd like to open this in Fusion and work on it. So if I want to take a look, I can also work on this directly right inside of my browser. I can just go up here and edit, and I can say edit inside the browser. Right now we don't have the full capacity, but in the near future that's where our developers are working to be able to have access for you to be able to do all your work right here in the browser. But for today, we have a small download of Fusion that we can work on the desktop as well. I can also share this if I wanted to share so somebody can see this view, and also download or export the part in the assembly as well. But I'm going to edit it on my desktop. So in the background, it gives me this ability. If I don't have Fusion installed, it will let me download and install Fusion right now. I do have it. It's opening in the background right now, so I'm going to minimize my browser. And I can see that it's going to switch me over to a new hub. I'm going to say OK. And in Fusion, it's going to pop up with that assembly. And I'm working inside of that other hub to be able to bring up that assembly we're talking about inside of the browser. So now I'm able to work with this assembly directly, and I can add CAD and CAM information right here. So there's my CAD. One of the parts needs to be updated. I just simply click Update. It'll update the part that has been changed automatically inside of this, in this view. So we're not going to work on this assembly today. You can see the part just stretched out and changed a little bit. I have the history here in my browser. So we're not going to work on this part. We're going to create a new part. But as I had mentioned, I had downloaded an assembly, and I'm going to upload that Curt Vise into a project, but I need to switch back over to that hub. So I'm going to close out of this project. I'm going to go over here and switch back over to that other hub that I was working in, this one right here. So I'm going to work in that Fusion Fast Track project. I just want to show you that you can switch between hubs right here inside of Fusion. You don't have to do it only in the web browser version as well. So I'm switched over to my other hub. This is my data panel. And in my data panel, I can have another way to view and access those projects right here. So I'm going to go into that Fast Track to CNC project. And in here, there's a turn example we worked with last week. So I'm going to upload the Curt Vise right into this project. So I'm going to click Upload. I'm going to select the files. And I believe I saved those files, or that file, right into my downloads. So I'm going to go to my Downloads folder, and there's the Curt Vise. It's the solid part of the vise. I'm going to open it. I'm going to upload it into this project, and you can see it's working here in the background. I can also see the status of the upload, and while it's uploading it, as long as I do this in Fusion, it's going to convert it to a Fusion part that I can work with. So there it is. It's completed. I'm going to close this, and now as soon as this is ready on the view, I'm able to work with that Curt Vise and be able to bring my part into it. So it looks like it's just converting it, and it's finalizing the convert. So I'm going to start working on the part that we're going to create to put into that vise. So I'm going to close out of my data panel. I'm going to let that finish in the background. So now I'm going to start a brand new part. So this is the interface that you see of Fusion. We work with our workspaces. This is our model workspace, which has our sketch for a parametric design. We can also create and start with different forms. So we can stretch, pull, and squish and move around these T-splines. We're able to stretch and make a part right from scratch like we're molding it. We're also able to modify, do direct modeling to the parts that we have. Also make assemblies right in the same view. So this is our model workspace. We have model workspace, patch workspace. So if you're working with your NURBS, or if you're working with STL files or files that are really just surface models, you can work in this patch workspace to work with your surface modeling. Rendering, we do full rendering, ray tracing, so that you can create the part and you can actually get ray traced views of it that look realistic, photorealistic, that you can put on your websites to show your customers what the final part will look like, or get a good idea to show customers what your parts are going to be. Animation, full animation, so you can show people how your product works. Simulate, you can do stress strain analysis, fluid flow, full simulation, Nastran that works right inside of our Fusion, as well as our CAM, where we're going to spend some time today to be able to put the toolpaths to make the parts that we're making, and of course make drawings if we need for our customers or for our vendors as well. So we're going to spend some time in the model and CAM, so I'm going to go back up into the model and I'm going to create a new part from scratch. It's going to be that carburetor adapter part. So in my browser here, I'm going to work. I can expand this down. If I want to change my units, I can do this here. You can change them at any time, and Fusion will recognize and change all the units accordingly. So I'm going to leave this as inches, and down here I have different views that we can work with, standard views, as well as my origin. So I'm going to turn on the origin so you can see the planes, the XY and the XZ and the X and the YZ plane, as well as the axes and the origin. I also have this view cube up here, and I can always grab a hold of that view cube and move to any view that I need. Down on the bottom here we have our timeline. So each time we add a sketch or we add a body, you'll see it being added to the browser as well as the timeline, so we can always go back in time and make changes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a sketch, and I'm going to have the sketch be on the Z up. So I want my sketch to be like this. I want my X along this direction, my Y going away from me as it will be in the machine, and my Z up. So I'm going to choose this plane. I can select it in this graphics view, which is also called the canvas view, and I can right click and create sketch. I can also grab it right out of the browser, right click, and say create sketch. This is my sketch palette over here. So now I'm going to sketch a rectangle for the base part. I'm going to put it in this quadrant right down here. So I'm going to start a rectangle. I can also hit the R key. But I'm going to start a rectangle. Notice next to my cursor, it now has a rectangle. So I'm going to place the first corner. As I hover over the origin, it snaps to the origin. I'm going to start to drag off to the right here. And you can see it starts to rubber band these dimensions on it as well. So if I use my middle mouse button, I'm going to scroll out a little bit. You'll see the number line change a little bit too. So this part's going to be 5 by 6. 6 is going to be along the long length of the part, along the X. So I'm just going to type in 6 and then hit the Tab key, and it locks it in. And this one's going to be 5, and I'll hit the Tab key again, and it locks them in, and now I can scroll my mouse around the different quadrants, but it locks in the length and the width. If I click right here, it now gave me this region. I have these black lines showing me that we're now confined. In other words, it's constrained. I also have these constraints right here, horizontal and vertical constraints, as well as the dimensions. Now, the rectangle remains on my cursor, so I can continue creating a new rectangle if I want. If I don't, so I'm going to hit Escape, and now I'm out of that command. Notice as I hover over the region, it highlights and shows me, if I click it, it shows me that's the region I can work with. It's actually real geometry that I can extrude. So I'm going to extrude this down. I'm going to make it a 1/2 inch thick part. So I'm going to go up to Create, Extrude, select that region, and I can just start to drag this down. Let me move my box a little bit. So I can just start to drag it down, or I can plug in a number here, and I can say I want this to be negative a 1/2 inch, and hit Enter. And now I have a part. So I started with a sketch, and now I have a body. I can see the history. Before there was a body, there was a sketch. So now I have this body and a sketch, and now I'm going to sketch out the features of the part, of the adapter plate. So I'm going to look at my napkin sketch here, and I know it's going to be symmetric about the left and right along the center of the part, as well as the top and bottom. So I'm going to make a sketch where I can make my symmetric features. So I'm going to create a sketch on the same plane. I'm going to select that same plane here in the canvas view, right-click, create sketch, and now I'm going to start a sketch here, but my body is sort of in the way. So if I start to draw a line, I'm going to be hitting this body. So I can simply go over here and hit this little light bulb and turn the body off. So now I can do a free sketch. I'd like to use the same sketch I had made the body with, so I'm going to go back here and turn it on. I'm going to project these edges into my new sketch. So I'm going to go to Sketch, Project Include, Project. I'm going to grab these edges, and they turn pink when they project into the current sketch. And when I'm completed, and it completes, it's closed, if I should say, it now gives me this region. I'm going to say OK, and now I'm going to turn off the other sketch in the background, and now I'm left with the sketch that I'm using today. Okay, so now I want to separate this into quadrants. So I'm going to start a line. I'm going to hit the L key, and now attached to my cursor is a line. You can see it highlighted up here, sketching a line, and there's that in context help when you need it. When you hover over these icons, you see that in context help. So I'm going to start a line. I'm going to hover over until I get to the midpoint. It snaps to the midpoint by, you can see that rectangle, or I'm sorry, the triangle over here, meaning it's the midpoint constraint. So I'm going to snap to the midpoint and drag my mouse down. Notice as I drag it, it also rubber bands the dimension as well as an angle. And if I go 90 degrees down, you see it snap, and it gives me that right angle constraint there. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to snap it to the center midpoint of this line. I'll do the same thing across the center this way. So now I have these 4 quadrants to work with because it's separated out each one of those areas, regions. But I don't want to do that. I want to make these construction lines. So I'm going to highlight this construction line, and when I do, notice it pops up here, my contextual options. So I'm going to make that become a construction line. The same thing for this one, construction line. Now I have 1 region but 4 quadrants to work with. So I'm going to start the freehand sketch up here, what I have on my napkin sketch. I'm going to hit L for line. I'm just going to click on this line where it intersects. You see the intersection constraint. I'm just going to start to draw, but I'm not worried about dimensions. I'm going to kind of draw the way it looks on my napkin sketch here. Okay, I'm going to kind of draw it out. But notice as I did that, and I kept my lines going straight, horizontal, and vertical, notice I have this right angle, or shall I say perpendicular constraint here for each one of these lines. So they're going to stay perpendicular to each other. So it's a quick way to show those constraints as long as I'm clicking and keeping them horizontal and vertical. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to add some dimensions to add additional constraint to make these blue lines turn black, which means they can't be dragged around anymore. They're fixed in space and constrained. So I'm going to hit D for dimension, or you can go to Sketch, Sketch Dimension. I'm going to dimension from here to this line. I'm going to make that a 1/2 inch. The same thing here. I'm going to make that 1/8 of an inch. It's also 1/8. And then from here to here, I'm going to make that a 1/2 inch. Now notice these lines are now constrained. They can't move back and forth, but these blue lines I can. One thing I want to do is I want to add some fillets around here before I move on to the next step. Now I can do that in the modeling, but I want to add sketch fillets here. So I'm going to go to Sketch, Fillet, And it doesn't give me a dimension yet until I go to select something. If I hover over a corner, it recognizes that as an area for a fillet. I just click, and now I get a fillet there. I can drag and move this as big as I need, or I can just put in a dimension, which is going to be 1/8 of an inch. Now I don't hit enter or anything else. I'm just going to continue adding the fillets that are 1/8 of an inch around my part. So now I've added those fillets. Now I'm going to hit enter, and now I have these fillets here. So now I want to constrain with dimensions this width and this width. So I'm going to hit D for dimension, grab that line to here, and I'm going to make this 1.5 inches. This one from this line to here is going to be 1 inch. And now I'm fully constrained, and you see all of the lines here are black, showing me that I'm fully constrained as I can't move the lines around. Okay, what I'd like to do is I'm going to add a slot feature in here. So I'm going to go up to Sketch, I'm going to go down to Slot, and I'm just going to kind of draw it arbitrarily right along here. I can give it the length, which is 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to give it a diameter. This is going to be 3/8. I don't know what happened to my width there, but I do want this thing to be constrained. I want to be able to put this horizontal, so I'm going to add a horizontal constraint to the center of this. And now I want to put that dimension in the center. Let me grab this, move it over. I want to dimension this, so I'm going to hit D for dimension. Not that. Here, I'll go from here to here. Here we go. And I'm going to make this also 3/4. And now I want to dimension from, let's say, the center of this to this edge here. I'll make that 1/2 inch. Now I'd like to dimension from this edge, but I don't want to go to the center, but I can only select the center. I want to go right to the midpoint of that arc. Well, it's not letting me select it, but if I hit the Shift key, now if I hover over, I'm able to select the midpoint of that arc, and I can add a dimension to the midpoint of that arc. Actually, I'm going to make this 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm able to add that dimension there by holding the Shift key. So now I have a slot feature, and now I'm ready to start to mirror this. I'm going to mirror about this axis and then mirror the whole thing of that axis. Okay, I hit Escape. So I want to grab a box around here to mirror, but I have all these constraints in the way. I can just hide them over here by saying unselecting or disabling Show Constraints. So I'm going to go and do a mirror. So I'm going to go up to Sketch, Mirror. I'm going to start a box working from left to right, which will grab all of the stuff inside of the box. If I went from right to left, it'll grab anything the box touches. But I'm going to go from left to right. I'm going to highlight all those lines and the slot, and I'm going to mirror it about this line here. I get a preview. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to mirror it about this center line. I'm actually just going to start to grab the stuff first. So I'm able to grab the geometry first, and now I'm going to go up and choose the command mirror, and it recognized those objects. I'm just going to mirror them about that center line there and say OK. So there's two different ways. You can grab the geometry first, or you can start the command first. But notice now it's closed. When I hover over this area, I can work with that region, this region, or the slot regions. I'm going to add also the Venturi in the center. I'm going to make it a boss and then a Venturi slot that we're making the carburetor down to the 2-barrel intake manifold. All right, so I'm going to select a rectangle. And I'm going to start it arbitrarily spot right in here in an arbitrary place. And this one's going to be 1.5 inches. Actually, I'm going to make this 2 inches. Tab. And this one's going to be 2.5 inches. Tab. I'm going to hit Enter. So now I have this rectangle sort of floating in the middle of the part. And what I want to do is I want to add some fillets around here. So I'm going to go up to the fillet command. Sketch fillet. Okay, I'm going to make these all 1/2 inch. And now what I'd like to do is I want to constrain this symmetric about the center line. So I'm going to choose Symmetry. I'm going to choose the first line, the second line, and those two I want to make symmetric about the center line. So I click the center line and it now makes them symmetric about the center line. I'll do the same thing. While I still have symmetry on my cursor here, I'm still highlighted symmetry. I'm going to grab this line, this one, I'm going to make them symmetric about the horizontal center line. So now I have this rectangle which is now constrained and it's symmetric about the center of the part. I'm going to add an offset, so I'm going to hit O for offset. I'm going to offset this chain a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to make it go negative 0.25. And now I want to put a slot feature in the center, which is our venturi going down to. So I'm going to do that as well. So I'm going to add another slot. And again, I'm going to start it along here. Okay, I'm going to add that dimension in the center. Yep. This dimension from here to here. And that is going to be 1 inch. And I also want this slot to be symmetric as well. So I'm going to make this symmetric by using symmetry. I'm going to select the midpoints of each of these arcs and then the center line. And that'll make even the slot symmetric about the center. Okay, and I want to make sure that this is also going to be, or actually I'm going to add the dimension for the diameter of this one. Select the diameter, and we're going to make this, that's actually the radius, 3/8. So we have a 3/4 inch diameter on the edge there. So that's going to be our venturi. We're going to go from this size down to that size. Actually, I realized I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go from this 250, I'm going to make it 3 inches. So that quick, I'm able to make a change. It stayed symmetric, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so let's model this part up. So I'm going to go and close out of my sketch, stop the sketch. And now I want to be able to cut away from the part. So I'm going to turn the body back on. It keeps my sketch on, and I have these different regions to work with. So now I'm going to choose Modify. I'm going to grab this region right here. I'm just going to start dragging it through the part, and notice it automatically wants to cut because it recognizes that we're dragging it through the part. If I start to raise it up, you see it wants to add a boss. It wants to join the body we're making. So it's really smart in the way it interacts with the bodies that are already there. I'm going to tell this I want to cut through, and I want to go through all. Okay, and now I was able to cut through the part, and that's what we're going to be left with after that cut. Now I'm going to turn my sketch back on because it turned off because I want to do additional features. I'm going to do these slots right here, so I'm going to go up to Modify. I'm going to grab each of these slots, and I'm going to start to pull them down, and they're going to go 1/8 of an inch. Okay, I want this to be a boss, so I'm going to start pulling that up. So I selected that region, Modify, and I'm going to start pull that up 1/4 inch. So now I want to be able to get my venturi. I want this shape to go down to that shape, but I want it on the bottom of the part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the bottom of the part. I'm going to create a new sketch there. I want to project that slot feature onto this view. So I'm going to go up to Sketch, Project, and I'm going to project each of these edges of the slot down onto the bottom of the part, and that becomes a region. So now I could do this. I'm going to make a loft. Create, loft, from this shape on top down to this shape on the bottom, and now I have this lofted cut feature, which will be the venturi, so that the gas will flow from the bigger carburetor down to the smaller intake. So now we have that 3D feature there, that quick and easy. Okay, so I'm going to turn off this sketch. I have this other sketch from the bottom of the part. I have the history. There is my venturi, my loft. I can always go back in time, and notice that the body and the sketches are going to change as I go back in time. So I can always go back in time, make a change that I need, and then update it. So there's 2 more features I want to add in here real quick. I want to add some 1/4 inch holes in here, and I also want to add a fillet going around here. So I'm going to go to Modify. Notice when we do Modify, it does a press pull. So if I grab the hold of this again, I can press and pull it up and down. But I'm not going to. I'm going to grab this edge right here. Just that little edge on here. If I can, let me grab that little edge. hang on a second, modify, edge, there we go. Okay, I think it was because I grabbed the body, it's expecting me to do a press pull. But since I grabbed that edge, it knows we want to do a fillet, and I can just start to grab that fillet and make it as big as I need to. So we're going to make it 1/8 of an inch. So now we have that fillet there for a little gasket to go on there. All right, so I want to drill some holes through the slots. So I'm going to turn that sketch back on. I'm going to go to Create, Hole, and I'm just going to select that center of the slot. I'm going to give us a diameter of 1/4 inch, and I want it to go through all. So now I have 1/4 inch going through, and I'll just keep selecting the center of each of those slots. So I don't have to create circles and hole features on the sketch. I could just select the centers that are already there, and now I've added holes going through. Okay, so there's our part. We're going to make this part. I'm going to show you how to turn that assembly that we downloaded of the Curt Vise into an assembly that we can put this part into. Okay, and we're going to put some cam on it. We're going to add our toolpaths to be able to make this part. There's actually another thing I want to add in here before we do, but I'm going to leave this open. Actually, I'm going to save it. When I hit save, because I'm already in this project, it's going to save it to that project. So I'm going to call this one Carb Adapter Plate. Make sure I call it Plate. Okay, so there's our adapter plate. I'm going to save it to this project, save, and you'll see it update into this project right here. Okay, so now we have our carb adapter plate, carburetor adapter plate. Now I want to bring in this Curt Vise, and I'll show you how to make it into an assembly. Okay, looks like, all right, no questions so far. So I'm going to go and right-click on this Curt Vise, and I'm going to open it. Okay, and this is the Curt Vise that we downloaded just now from the Curt website. It was a SolidWorks part, but now it's a Fusion part that we can work with. So a little bit of cleanup I want to do. I want to make sure that this is in inches. I'm just going to switch it over to inch. And now I can see the origin, and I can see the bodies that make up this part. So it was a multi-body part, but I can't access those bodies. In other words, I can select them and highlight them, but I have no way to move them around individually. And that's okay. I'm going to show you how to do that in a little while. While they're still all bodies, I want to rotate this around to match what I have in my machine. It's a really good idea to create assemblies like this, to create an assembly of what you actually have on your machine. Like if you have Mighty Bytes on your table, you can download your machine table and put the Mighty Bytes on there and then have it set up and ready for your part. The closer you can mimic what's going on in your machine, the closer you can mimic that here inside of the powerful CAD environment, the more accurate you're going to be with your design, with your toolpaths and your machining. So I'm going to create this. I'm going to make this into a template so I always have that Curt Vise just like it matches on the machine. So when I bring a part in, it's always going to have the origin and everything I need as a template to run. So I can just simply bring a part in. It already has my G54. It already has my tools. Just select them and go. So it's a good way to work. It's really efficient. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reorient this because it's sitting sideways. You see my Y is going into the machine, my X is going back and forth, and my Z is up. But my vise isn't set up that way. So I'm going to rotate it around. And how I do that is I select this body, I'm going to hold Shift and select all those bodies. I'm going to right click while I'm still on top of the blue body here and move, copy. Okay, I'm going to do the move command. I have these handles here. I can drag it and move it back and forth, up and down, left and right. I can also move it by plane, and I can also grab a hold of these angle handles here. So I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to start to turn it around 90 degrees as if it's sitting on top of the table there. And now I want to rotate this one around so I can match the way it's sitting in the machine, 90 degrees. So now I have my Y going into the machine, my X going back and forth, and my Z is up. I'm going to hit OK. So now I positioned it, and now what I'd like to do is I want to get the origin right on this corner of the fixed jaw plate. Now you can have, like often we'll have like a dowel pin hole in the center of the fixed jaw, but in this case I want to be able to have it, I don't have that here, so I'm going to use this corner right there, that point on the fixed jaw plate as my origin. So again, I'm going to grab all these bodies, hold Shift, right-click, move. This time I'm going to go from point to point. I'm going to select this point on the fixed draw plate. I'm going to select the origin, and you see it snaps to the origin, and now I've moved those bodies right there, right at the origin. That's going to be my G54. Okay, you don't have to do it this way. It's just one way to work, but I'm just showing you how you can do it with an imported SolidWorks model. Now, I'd like to be able to make this as a moving jaw and all the other stuff fixed. Okay, I want to mimic the way the jaws and the vise is going to work on my machine. So I'm going to go into those bodies right here to highlight the folder for bodies. I'm going to right click and I'm going to turn I'm going to turn the bodies into components. So by turning them into components, they each become their own part with their own origin, and now I can be able to move them around independently, and they have their own origin and place. Now, I'm not going to do that right here. I'm going to undo a couple times. What I do want to do is I want to make them groups. So I'm going to select all the components that are the fixed vise, and I'm going to ground them. So I'm going to select this component. I'm going to hold Control and select the individual components. Now that one I actually want to keep these three as moving. I'm going to grab these components because these are fixed components. Okay, these are going to be part of the moving jaw, and this is going to be part of the fixed component. So I grabbed all the ones that are fixed and left alone all the moving jaw components. I'm going to right click on those components. I'm going to ground them. So now they're locked in place and I can't move them around. They have this little push pin icon. I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm going to grab and hold Control those components that can be moved. I'm going to turn them into a rigid group. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go down here to rigid group. And if I had any parts like sub-assembly parts, it would also include those children as well. I'm going to say OK. And now when I move them around, they all stay part of the same group. Okay. Now what I'd like to do is I want to make this a moving jaw back and forth, but I want these faces to be associative as joints. So I'm going to go Assemble, Joint. I'm going to select the center of this face and the center of this face, and it makes a joint, and it locks them together there. I actually want them to be a slider joint, so I'm going to change it right here from rigid joint down to a slider joint. So it's a little bit different when you're thinking of locking those 6 degrees of freedom. It's actually mimicking the way that these components are going to work in the real world. So I'm going to say OK, and now if I go to move it, I have a slider joint that keeps those two faces normal to each other. But I can always go right through it now. So I can lock this down even more to the actual dimensions that can move. So if I notice in my browser here, I now have a folder called Joints. And I can go down to the slider joint, right click, and add joint limits. So my minimum joint can be 0. My maximum joint can be 3. Actually, it's going to be 8. It's going to be 8 inches. So I'm going to say OK, and now when I go to slide it, it stays 0 to 8 inches. So now I can move that around. I can also lock it in a position so I know where my part's going to be when I bring it in. Okay, so now I was able to take that part, we're able to move it around, and we're able to make a sliding jaw inside of that vise. So that's the basic steps. When you download, you're able to bring it in as a fusion, or a part or assembly, turn it into an assembly, and you're able to make it mimic what's going on in the real world. You can even get more, and then you can do things like drive joints and motion links. You can actually have this turn when the handle turns. The lead screw actually has a pitch, and you can make this move according to the actual lead screw. It's a lot of fun stuff you can do like that in Fusion, but I'm not going to do that today. Okay, so I'm going to save this as my template. So I'm going to go to Save As. I'm going to call this one my Curt Vise template. It's a good idea to create templates like this. So now when you house your toolpath information, you can house your tools. You can keep toolpaths in here. So every time you bring a part in, it's already set up, has your G54 set up. You can just set up your stock really quickly. So it's a good idea to have a template like this. Plus you don't have to put all the toolpath data on the original part itself. Okay, so I'm just going to hide this origin for now. and I'm going to bring it apart, and we're going to put some toolpaths on it. So let's go and open up our carb adapter plate right here. What I want to do now is I'm going to actually, because I don't want to put it in as if this is stock, I want to have a body that represents my stock. Okay, so if I open up this body here, and if we go back in time, remember we made this body? This can represent the stock, but actually it's not, because it's a lot bigger than that. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a new body, but from this original sketch. So I'm going to turn on that sketch, highlight it, okay, I'm going to say create, and notice here it says new body. I can create a new body, and up top I'm going to make this go up 30. It actually changed to cut, but I'm going to keep this on new body. I'm going to make this 300 thousandths on top because we have a 1/4 inch, so it leaves us 50 thousandths from the top of the body. And now I'm going to make it two-sided, and on the bottom I'm going to bring this down 70. So we have an inch stock. Okay, so I'm going to make that into a new body. And notice up here in our browser we have body 1 and body 2. I'm going to soft click on body 2 and I'm going to call that stock. I can hide it. I can hide that sketch. What I'd like to do is I'm going to change the appearance of that stock so I can see the body on the inside so I know which side I'm going to be actually machining. So I'm going to right click on there and I'm going to say appearance. And I'm going to change that appearance, and I can make it anything we need. It's only going to represent the stock. It's not going to be the actual stock. So I'm going to change that to something like glass, like smooth glass. I can make it like this glass. I just drop it on this body right here. And now we just made it. I'm making it glass only so I can see through it. It doesn't have to be glass. You can also change, its transparency. But I like doing this because it makes it easier for me to be able to position the part. And that's all I'm going to use this for, is for positioning. So that's a quick trick for you to be able to make a stock that matches the body. So for now I'm going to save it like this. Okay. Every time you go to do a save, it's going to ask you for a version description. And just say, just put in what you changed. I'm going to put in stock body. This way you'll have it in the future. If you're working with other people, they'll know what's changed in the model. So it keeps that with a version history. So if I see the part, I can see that there's a V1 and then there'll be a V2 on here. And I can always go back in the history of those components, and I can always work with any of those parts in the history. Okay, so it does keep the track of your version history. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that part into this vise to work with it. So I'm going to go back to the data panel, I'm going to right click on that adapter plate and say insert into current design. And it brings that part in here, and now we can work with it. We can move it around. We can position it where we need to. So it kept that corner. It knows that top right corner. I could just raise this part up. You could do it here, or you could use joints to do that as well. Right? As long as I know where the top of the part is and I know where the top of the vise is, I could just plug in the numbers and make it really quick and easy. Okay? I can also change my joint limits here, and whatever the width this part is, so if I made that 5 inches, I could just go into my joint limits, and I can always just make this 5 inches. And now it matches exactly the way it's going to sit in the machine. So now let's get some toolpaths on here. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to be able to turn off the stock view of this part. So as I expand this down, I can see that there's bodies here, but I'm not able to turn them off because it's a linked part. It's linked back to the original. Now soon, in the near future, they're working on this to be able to turn these off at this level to make this active and turn them off. But right now, I have to go into the part and make a change for today. Okay, so as I'm in this part, I'm just going to hide that stock body, save it, and now if I go into my vise, you see it, there's an update. So I'm going to choose to do the update. It tells me something is out of date, and now I'm going to get the latest one, and now it'll have the part position, but I'm not showing the stock, but I know it's sitting in the right position there on the part. Okay, so let's set up our stock. Let's get ready for CAM. So I'm going to switch over to our CAM workspace, and now I'm going to do a quick setup. So all you need to do in the CAM workspace, working from left to right, you have all your toolpath information to set up and be able to run this part in your machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to select Setup. Okay, and it recognizes all the information we have in the graphics view. Let me move this over. So there's my setup. It recognized all the bodies. So if I wanted to cut all those bodies, I could. It gave me the minimum stock I would need. But I'm not going to do that. I only want to cut this one body, so I'm going to exit out of there and just simply select that body. That's what we want to machine. Now, it positioned our stock point right in the center of the stock. But I can change this. If I wanted to make this, I can say I want to choose that corner of my stock or this corner of the stock. I can choose those places. If I wanted my origin, that to be my G54, I can just simply change that, and I can say selected point, and it grabs that point. Or I can even say the model origin, it's the same point in this case. Okay, so I can choose that to be my G54 if I want to, or if I'm going to probe, I can always set it back to the center again as well. Now, we did make a model that represents our stock size, but we can go into stock and I can start to change. Like right now, it's a relative size stock, so if I, let's say, add it like a ½ inch, it'll stretch the stock around and make it a ½ inch bigger. But we actually have a stock body, so I'm going to change this. Instead of being a relative size stock or a fixed size box where we can just plug in the numbers, I'm going to change this from solid. I'm going to go into my history, my Curt Vise template. There's my part, and there's that body we created as stock. I just select it, and that becomes the stock. So it was good that we created that stock because I'm using it. So as the part grows, so will that stock. So now we're all set up and ready to go and put some toolpaths on. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I want to face off the top of the part. So I'm going to go up to 2D, go down to face. Got that in context help where we need it. So I'm going to select face. The one thing I love about our CAM, it's always the same workflow, working from left to right. Select our tool, geometry, heights, passes, and our linking parameters. So I'm going to select the tool, working from left to right, top to bottom. I'm going to select the tool out of the library. We have lots of tools that come with our samples libraries, as well as libraries that we can create. I suggest create a tool library that matches what you have in your machine. So if I'm working on my Haas VF2, I'm going to turn that on. Okay, and we have a UMC that I'm working with, or a tool room mill. So I'm going to turn on the Haas VF2. We have different tools to work with as well as our samples. And I just chose it up here to turn them on and hide different libraries and turn them on. If you want to create a new library, you can do that up here. Just create a new library, or you can right-click on the local and you can say New Tool Library. Like down here, I could just say I want to make a new tool library and add tools to it. It's easy to create new tools to your tool library. Just right-click, Edit Tool, or you can make a new tool up here and add a tool. Quick and easy. So I'm going to use that library that we're working with for the VF2. I have this 1 3/4 face mill. If I needed to make any changes, I can right-click and edit that tool right here. I could change any of the cutter aspects, the holder, the speeds and feeds. I can plug them in right here to match my vendor's speeds and feeds. Put in the tool number, any information we need to know, we can plug in here and say, okay, I'm going to select that tool, and there it is in the graphics view. I can see the tool, what it's going to look like before I go on to the next step. Now the next step would be select in geometry, but I don't have to because when we did our stock setup, it recognizes where the top of the part is, and it knows where the top of the stock is. So it knows how much material that we need to remove. So it's going to say OK, and I get a toolpath. I want to see that toolpath, so I'm going to go up to Simulate, and I can start to play through that simulation. Now I want to see what it's going to look like as if I had stock on the part, so I'm going to turn on stock here. And now I can continue to play through. I could see it cutting through, and I could see it taking that 50 thousandths off the top of the part. That looks pretty good. Now if I wanted to, I might want to go back and change that and take 25 thousandths at each pass. I can easily go up and right-click on the face toolpath and edit it to change the passes down here to go multiple depths. And I want to go 25 thousandths at each step down, and it adds additional passes on there. Again, I can simulate and I can see what's going on, and I can also speed it up. Okay, I can also grab a hold of this position bar down here and move it to any position I wanted to, and then have it continue. So now it's going Smaller step downs, I can see the top of the part. I know that that toolpath looks good. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I want to clean up around this outside of the part. Actually, I want to clean up as much as I can. So I'm going to use this as a 3D adaptive clearing. So I'm going to go to 3D adaptive clearing. Really good calculated toolpath, great algorithm for keeping the tool engaged with the material as much as possible, always keeping the same chip load on the tool. So you're going to save tool life, and you're going to have a very efficient toolpath because it keeps it engaged as much of that depth that you can use in your tool. So I'm going to select adaptive clearing. I'm going to select a tool out of my library. So I want to use a 1/4 inch tool, 1/4 inch rougher. Actually, in this case, I'll probably use a 3/8 rougher. So I'm going to go and filter on my tools. I'm going to use a bowl mill, so I'm going to filter out those other tools. And now I'm going to filter on dimensions, and I want it to be 3/8. Let's say I want to look for a range of 3/8 to a 1/2 inch. So I can see all the tools, and it filters to all my 3/8 and 1/2 inch tools in the different libraries. Okay, there's a 1/2 inch bull nose. I'm going to grab that tool. So I'll use the 1/2 inch. That'll work in this case. So I select it. I can see it in the graphics view. The next thing would be what geometry. Now in the 3D toolpath, the tool's going to go wherever it can go most efficiently to remove the chips, but I can also choose areas and regions where I want to contain the toolpath. In this case, I'm going to leave it out of the box. I'm going to say OK, and then the toolpath is going to calculate the best approach that it can remove those chips really efficiently. Okay, and it quickly calculated. I'm going to show you what's going on here. It's going to helix down, and we have a tapered helix here, so it leaves room for those chips to get out, and it won't recut those chips. So you're not recutting chips, and you're not work hardening. So it reaches the bottom of the pocket using as much of that flute length as possible. Then it starts into the pocket. So it keeps the constant same load on the tool. In other words, the same chip size the entire time. When it reaches a point where it can't keep the same chip load, it lifts off the material, comes around for another bite, and then it goes in at exactly the same chip load. And it keeps doing that as it works its way into a pocket like this until it reaches the corner. When it gets into the corner, it goes to the same chip load until it gets smaller and smaller. So you won't bury the tool in any corners, and you're always keeping the same size chips coming out. So if you can control the chip size, you can control or run at a higher speeds and feeds. In other words, a higher speed, a spindle speed, because you're going to control that chip size. So you're transferring the heat that you're cutting from the tool and the part into the chip. So if you're transferring the heat, you can run at higher spindle speeds. Running at higher speeds and feeds, you're going to get the parts off the machine a lot quicker, and you're going to save tool life. So let's take a look at this toolpath. So I'm going to go up here to simulate. We've already seen it do the face, and we're going to simulate the adaptive. Actually, I didn't grab the face, so I'm going to grab setup, so it grabs all the toolpaths, go up to simulate. I'm going to go past the face, and now what I'd like to do is I want to simulate what's going to happen. Now, I'm seeing all that toolpath data in the way, so I'm going to change that down to tail. So I'm only seeing the toolpath of where it's been. It's keeping that same load on the tool the entire time, right? Keeping that same size chip, keeping it as gauged as much as possible, and using as much of that flute length as possible. Okay, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. It starts to get into that pocket again, keeping that same load on the tool as it works its way into that pocket. So it goes deep, and now it's going to work its way up, keeping that little pyramid effect as it works its way up into that pocket there, that 3D pocket. And now it's going to cut off, working its way from the outside in. Again, keeping that tool engaged as much as possible until it gets down to that boss. So that's the 3D adaptive clearing toolpath. Okay, and I'm realizing we're getting pretty close to time, but I want to show you a couple more. I'm going to clear out these areas here with the slot toolpath. So I'm going to go up to slot. Okay, I'm going to go to 2D, slot toolpath. And I'm going to go to my tool selection. I'm going to select a flat 3/8 tool. Again, I'm going to filter on 3/8. There's a flat mill. I'm going to use this one. And now I'm going to select the geometry, which would be the bottom of these slots here. Now for my heights, I don't want it to come all the way from the top of the stock all the way down. So for my top height, I'm going to change that. Instead of stock top, I'm going to choose this selection face right here. And now it's going to start from that face down. At least our feed height's going to be 200 thousandths above there. And now it starts the slot toolpath down into their slots. So it's easy to control those. I want to be able to clean up outside of here. I want to get all this horizontal stuff, so I'm going to go up to do a 3D horizontal to clean up. And I'm going to use that same 3/8 flat mill to clean up all the flat faces on the part. Okay, I can add some containment. If I don't want it to try to go inside of this part, I can always say I want to contain it outside of a boundary, or I could select a boundary. I want it to stay from here to here, and it'll stay in that boundary there. I can also tell it the heights. I don't want it to go below this face right here. Well, let's see. Let's leave it. I'm going to say OK. And so it's going to clean up that area outside of that pocket there. So a 3D horizontal finds its own region. In other words, it finds its own containment. So it's looking at all the flat places where I left stock. I can do a 3D contour on the outside of the part to clean it up. But what I want to do is I want to show you how to get in here. I'm going to use a 3D ramp with a ball mill to get into there, into that venturi. So I'm going to do a 3D ramp, which keeps the tool engaged with the material. So I'm going to select the ball mill. I think I'll get a 1/4 inch ball mill. So out of my library, I'm going to filter on my ball mill. I'm going to use my dimensions here. I'm going to filter on 1/4 inch. Okay, filter on 1/4 inch. And now I find all the 1/4 inch ball mills. I think I have one in here. I'm going to select. I can see the tool in the graphics view. And now I'm going to tell it, where do I want it to cut? Well, I want it to stay inside of this area as the boundary. And for my heights, I don't want it to cut anywhere above this. So I'm going to say my top height is going to be that selected edge right there. So it drops the top down, so it starts my cut right there. And I want to make sure I go all the way through to the bottom. So I'm going to add a little bit of an offset, let's say a 1/16 of an inch. Okay. So now we get this ramp toolpath. Now I didn't set how much offset there was, or I didn't set the step over or the ramp or the step down. And I can always set that to be really fine. But that's how I would set that toolpath up, using containment to keep it inside of that area, using heights to contain it from that point down. Okay, and we can make that much, much more fine if we go to Edit, go into the Passes tab, and we can tell it what our maximum step down is. You can get really fine. We can say 5 thou. It calculates pretty quickly, and now we have this 5 thou step down in our ramp. All right, so I'd like to clean up around here. I'm going to use a pencil toolpath to clean up that edge on the outside of this. I want to get that nice round there. So it's 1/8 of an inch, so I'm going to use my 1/4 inch tool. So I'm going to do a 3D pencil, and I'm going to tell, just say OK, and it finds all those places where the 3D pencil can go. It's even trying to get into that slot there. So I can limit that too. If I go into the pencil, and I'm going to say I don't want to go anywhere below this face, and now it's not going to try to get into those slots. So let's take a look at those. So I'm going to go to Setup, I'm going to Simulate, I'm going to play through those toolpaths. In fact, I can jump down. There's our adaptive we saw. Here's our slots. Okay, I'm going to play it from here. Okay, it's did those slots, and now it's going to go and do the horizontal. Okay, we can see it do the horizontal. We can also go down here and grab a hold of this position bar and watch it do those different toolpaths. We can always move it back through a toolpath, and it will continue right where we left off. So now it's making that nice fine step down in our venturi there. Okay, I can speed it up a little bit. So we got this part pretty well roughed. That's what I'm going to look at when we get to the machine. It's roughing it out pretty well. I want to drill some holes real quick in there. But looking at the time, I think I'm going to try to get some code to the machine, and we'll make some changes real quick. Okay, looks like I need to rough that out a little bit more. inside of there. But it's good that the simulation shows me that. And if I had any places where the tool's going to collide with stock, it would highlight right here in red and show me where it's going to collide. But at least I can see that in the simulation before I move on to the next step. Okay, let's get some code to rough it out. So I'm going to go up to Setup. I'm going to go up here, I'm going to grab a setup sheet real quick. I'm going to save it in a project folder, or you could save it in another folder on your network if you wanted to. Okay, and it gives me this HTML setup sheet right out of the box. So it shows me my part, it shows me right where my WCS is, so if I set my assembly up correctly, it'll show me where I can plug that right into control for my datum. It shows me here which operations we're doing, which tools are being used, maximum feed rate, maximum spindle speed, which is interesting, and then our rapid distance and the estimated cycle time it's going to take for that whole program. For each operation, we have the tools set up for that operation. What holder are we using, length offset, diameter offset, estimated cycle time for each one of those operations. So it's a really nice setup sheet right out of the box. Okay, let's get some code. So I'm going to post out the code. So I'm going to go, while I have it highlighted on setup, I'm going to go to post process. I'm going to choose my Haas. I'm going to switch over to my generic posts. This is my personal post. You can use your personal post folder, or you can go to your generic posts, which get updated very often. In fact, every time Fusion gets updated, you'll update your post as well. So now out of this list, I can see I have lots of posts to choose from. These are generic posts. They're not encrypted. You can always go in and edit your post. I highly suggest making a copy before you do so. So I'm going to go into my Haas CPS. My generic Haas works well for my Haas VF machine. If you don't see your post in this list, you can always search our online post library. I just click that link on the bottom here, and you can always search that online post library, and you can see different posts. You could search them by vendor. You could search them by type, and you can see that they get updated very often. This one was updated less than an hour ago, my generic Haas. 19 days ago. Our team keeps our post updated, so as the vendors change the way that they work with the machines, we keep our post updated as well. So you can always search this library online to find your post. If you don't find it, you can also go to our forums, our Autodesk forums, where you can get a lot of help with posts. Okay, so I have some switches that I can put on here. If I want to have my chip transport on, optional stop turned on, preload the next tool as the carousel is going around, as the part's moving, as we're moving in position. G187, G28, I can turn on. My radius, I can use I, J, and K versus R. I'm going to leave them the way they are. Post out, save my post where I want it. And now I have the code that I can run, take over to the machine right now, and I can rough this part out. Now, before I do, I realized the part's not right. I got to make a quick change to the slots in the center Venturi slot. So I'm going to go into the part real quick. I need to change the width of where those slots are. So I'm going to edit this sketch. Instead of this being 3/4 of an inch, I need this to be a 1/2 inch. So I change the slots. And now instead of this one being 3/4 of an inch, I need this to be 1 inch. Oops. You make that a 1/2 inch. There we go. So I'm changing the Venturi size. In fact, I'm going to make this 2 1/4 inches. That's a little bit bigger, and this is a little bit longer too. So I'm going to make this one 3 1/4 inches. Come on. There we go. Make it 3 1/2 inches. So we're making some pretty big changes to our part here. I'm going to save it, stop the sketch, save our part. All right, turn off that sketch, and now I'm going to go back into my Curt Vise template, and you can see the part's been updated. So I'm going to go back into my model view and update it, and you'll see the slots change and the Venturi change. So it's updated. I think I left that sketch on. No? Maybe I had the sketch on when I saved it. So we'll have another change. There we go. That sketch should turn off now. Should. All right, here we go. There's our update. We'll go back into the cam. Now all of our toolpaths are red, have this red with the exclamation point on them. So you can see the adaptive. You can see it's cutting in the wrong place. Our slots are too big. The horizontal is cutting in the wrong place. So now we need to update it. So if I go to Setup, right-click, Generate, or hit Control-G, it updates all of those toolpaths. I don't know what I did with the ramp, but we'll double-check. Oh, you know what it is? We selected the edge. So I need to reselect the edge because I selected geometry off the part. See, I need to reselect that chain. I think we should be okay there. Ah, okay. So my top height changed. So I want to change my top reference here as well. In fact, this edge right here. Okay, recalculates that quick. And now we have the face in the right place, our adaptive updated accordingly, the slots changed accordingly, and our pencil, and we had to update our ramp. But now we're able to go and get that code posted out, overwrite the old code, and now we have the new code with the new part that quick. Okay, so that was our interface. We're able to draw up a part really quickly. We're able to download an assembly from the Curt website, a SolidWorks part, uploaded it into Fusion, was able to work with it, turned it into an assembly really quickly, made our part, brought it into the assembly, and added toolpaths that we can run, and we did it all within an hour. So you could do this. Try this with your parts. Create a template that matches the way you work in your machine. Design up your parts, bring them into that template, and apply your toolpaths. Okay? Really quick and easy to use. It's always the same workflow for each toolpath. It's always the same tabs. Complete integration. Anytime we make a change to the model, it updates the CAM. All right, and it looks like we might have a question here. Let me take a look. Okay, it looks like, so it looks like the question was, is this recorded going to be posted somewhere? Yes. Caesar, this is going to be posted on our HSM website. So if we look here, I'm going to go into YouTube, our HSM CAM YouTube. So if you do a search for Autodesk HSM, you're going to find all of our videos of all of our quick tips as well as our fast track Hangouts. You're going to find them right here. And this one's going to be uploaded today. So you'll be able to find it in this list here. So that, look for Autodesk HSM YouTube channel. That's where we're going to post them. And so it looks like we're a question about modeling a component and then link the component. Okay, so we can do it from top down or bottom up. So you can actually design your part right inside of here and then save it off. So that's working from the top down. So I can actually create a part. I can go into a sketch. So if I go to New, Design from File, or if I choose New Design, I can actually do it this way. I can create a new design, right-click, I can say New Component. And I can create a new component. Where did my little window go? I think it's asking me for the plane here. So I can create a new component right inside of this view. It'll become part of the assembly, and I can just simply save it out as its own part. I could do that. Let me just go to undo real quick. Or I can create the part separately like we did, and I can insert it and have it as a separate part. I can always right-click on here, and I can say I want to break the link, and then it becomes a component that's inside of this assembly. You could do that as well. So there's a few different ways to work with your assemblies and your parts that you don't have to be locked down to using multiple parts. You can do it all in one assembly as well. So hopefully that helps to answer your question. Cool, you got it, guys. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, thank you for sticking around. I know we went a little bit over. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and it shows you some of the power of what we can do inside of Fusion, what our integrated CAD, CAM processes are, what that workflow looks like, and hopefully this will help you guys get started. Try this on your machine, set up your parts, set up your assemblies, and I know you'll be successful in getting good parts off your machines. So with that, guys, Thanks for joining us, and tune in next week. We're going to have 2-axis turning, basic turning, on how we set up parts to do on our lathe machines. And also tune into our Friday webinars. We do our Fast Track Fridays every Friday at the same time that you joined today. So keep an eye out for that. Go to our Fast Track program where you can get a link and a list of all those webinars and who's going to be on. All right, guys. So I'm glad it was helpful. So yeah, enjoy your week. Thanks for joining us, guys. Bye now.